Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the Larouche organization with your daily video update for October 13th, 2022. Yesterday, I included in my report the article in The Economist magazine, their special report actually, titled A New Order, in which they acknowledged what we have been virtually alone in reporting over the recent months, that the push for war against Russia and China is the result of an effort to save the collapsing global financial system, what The Economist correctly labeled the, quote, liberal world order, unquote. And they attacked China in particular as undermining this world order, but also referred to Russia as playing a brazen role in demeaning the efforts to keep this order together. And in particular, they attacked Russia and China for not accepting the West's attacks on Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya as necessary to preserve the world order. Well, of course, the Russians and Chinese don't support those attacks, and many other nations in the world also don't think military strikes against countries with different views are acceptable. But what is this liberal world order that The Economist is defending? It's a global system of top-down financial and economic control. The now discredited idea from the World Economic Forum, from Klaus Schwab, from King Charles, called the Great Reset. Now, this idea starts with the conception that the interests of global corporate cartels take precedence over the needs of the population of sovereign nation states. They argue that only one model is acceptable, the British model, which is now the Anglo-American model of corporate financial empire. This is the model that the American Revolution was fought against in the 18th century. And it's been updated and continued even after the collapse of the British military dominance, with the power of the City of London dictating policies to nations. Now, this includes such things as free trade, which is not free, which is essentially a manipulated operation to defend the interests of corporate cartels. It's a no regulation or a deregulated system so that the most powerful entities with the most money can do whatever they want and squeeze everyone else out of existence. It includes privatization. It includes degrading and dismantling of efficient energy systems and replacement of them with inefficient, costly alternative subsistence models, zero carbon energy, the so-called Green New Deal, which is intimately connected with the Great Reset through its leading sponsors such as King Charles, BlackRock, Klaus Schwab, and others. A major part of this is the deindustrialization of the so-called advanced sector and a global depopulation, a Malthusian policy that will be enforced by what they're calling global NATO, what Liz Truss called in her UN General Assembly address, economic NATO. That is, the military forces will be deployed against any nation which refuses to go along with this, refuses to surrender their sovereignty, even against Russia and China, as we see in the NATO commitment to continue the war in Ukraine. Now, in the meantime, we're seeing the system collapse. The International Monetary Fund released a report yesterday which said, quote, the worst is yet to come, unquote. And they quoted the IMF chief economist who said 2023 will be a painful year. There will be a lot of economic pain. And that's what's being inflicted now on the populations of the whole world, including increasingly on those populations in the so-called advanced sector in the north. Now, one indication of the intent to continue this policy was the awarding by the Nobel Economic Prize Committee of their 2022 award to former U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke. You may recall Bernanke's nickname was Helicopter Ben because of his commitment to the quantitative easing policy, which was throwing money out of helicopters, he said, to bail out the collapsing financial system. Well, the evil idiocy of this policy can be seen today in the absurd debate going on in the United Kingdom over the Truss mini budget policy, which has completely destabilized the already weak financial and economic system of the United Kingdom. They're alternating between quantitative easing, which is flood of money, and quantitative tightening, which is withdrawing that money from the system. On the one side, you have quantitative easing, where money is made available to banks to lend to their corporate and other customers to prevent chain reaction bankruptcies. And this includes especially, it's related to financial innovations such as derivatives, credit default swaps, and so on. And the alternative is quantitative tightening, supposedly to stop inflation. Well, when you accelerate the gas and then slam on the brakes, you're creating both inflation and physical economic collapse. The Bank of England announced they're going to continue, at least for a couple of days, the emergency purchase of government bonds. But yesterday they issued this warning. This is from the Bank of England. Quote, "Dysfunction in this market and the prospect of self-reinforcing fire sale dynamics pose a material risk to UK financial stability," unquote. Well, of course it does. But the concern is not so much with financial stability, but with the effects that's having on the population. You can see the concern at the highest levels related to the situation faced by populations. This is not some arcane debate between academic theorists. It's a life and death situation for increasing numbers of people. We're seeing a growing revolt in the United Kingdom with a potential strike wave, with anger in the population. We see it growing in Europe as well. We see election results throwing existing parties out and searching for some kind of alternative. Now, the alternative exists. There's the emergence in the world of a new financial architecture centered around such institutions as the BRICS, the Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa alliance, the BRICS Bank, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the African Union, and so on. And what do these institutions have in common? Russia and China are at the center of creating a new financial architecture. This is what the Economist magazine acknowledged, that Biden and NATO are going to keep the war going and possibly launch a war against China over Taiwan to protect a collapsing financial system. It has nothing to do with sovereignty for the people of Ukraine and defense of the freedom of Ukrainians. If they were really concerned about the Ukrainian population, they would pull the International Monetary Fund out of Ukraine, because the IMF has imposed more hardship on the Ukrainian people than anyone else. Instead, they're insisting that Ukraine double down with IMF austerity policies. Now, that's what this whole fight is about. Will there be a new financial system, a new order out of control, out of the control of the City of London and Wall Street, which takes into concern the interests of the people of sovereign nation states who can enter into multilateral agreements? Or will we continue the one-size-fits-all unilateral order? Now, this Saturday, the Schiller Institute will have another in its series of conferences to address this. This one is an international youth conference, and the topic will be replacing the unipolar order and its so-called rules-based order. And this rules-based order essentially operates from one rule: do as we say, or you will face a regime change operation, whether it's demonstrations, assassinations, or war, a coup. Well, instead, we're advocating and have been advocating for the longest time a new financial architecture. This was Lyndon Larouche's specialty, honed over 50 years of meetings and writings and speeches, which has garnered support from around the world. All you have to do is look at the comments from Sergei Glaziev, a leading Russian economist, praising Larouche as the leading economic genius of our time. Look at the Chinese media featuring Helga Larouche to talk about the broad extension of what the Belt and Road Initiative would mean. There are meetings every week of these institutions planning out a different course than the course demanded by global NATO and the City of London. So don't just complain about the hardships you're facing. Most of the world is facing this. We need the citizens of the world to get together and put an end to this unipolar order. So become part of the solution. Let me just mention a couple of other stories quickly. Yesterday, we also reported on Tulsi Gabbard's denunciation of the control of the war hawks of the Democratic Party. And she discussed the fact that you need independent action outside of that party. Now, the point is, both parties support the war. The votes in the Congress for funding the Ukraine war against Russia have been virtually unanimous. Well, there is an alternative, and this is maybe what Gabbard is pointing to. Diane Sare is an independent LaRouche candidate for U.S. Senate in New York. She's running against one of Biden's leading proponents in the Senate, Charles Schumer, who's a war hawk, typical corrupt Democrat, controlled by Wall Street. There's going to be a debate on October 30th. Diane is one of 3 candidates in this race, and Schumer's trying to keep her out. We need people to insist that Diane Sare be included in that October 30th debate. How can Schumer claim to be supporting democracy, as he does all the time, when he's not just excluding Sare, who is put on the ballot by over 60,000 citizens who signed her petitions, but he's including the funding of a Ukraine military security institution called the Committee to Combat Disinformation, which is putting its opponents, which are opponents of the NATO war, on a hit list. A hit list, including Diane Sare and a number of Americans. So Diane will be a headline speaker at the Saturday, October 15th International Schiller Youth Conference, and you can register for it at the bottom of the description section of our update today. Now, finally, just a quick note from Vladimir Putin in a speech he gave yesterday. He offered energy-starved European Union nations access to Russian gas supplies. He said that if they want gas, open the remaining operational line of the Nord Stream 2 instead of blowing it up. Good advice. Tomorrow is Friday, so I'll be taking your questions. You can send them to me at harleysch@gmail.com. That's harleysch@gmail.com. And let me send a special thanks to all of you who wished a happy birthday to me and my wife yesterday. We both have the same birthday. Columbus Day, and we haven't been canceled yet, but I wish to say thank you for that. It made our day. So see you again tomorrow.